Cheers guys, I hope that all of you are doing really well, and in today's video I want to talk a little bit, a small introduction sharing my thoughts about the betrayal wound and how that shows up in a relationship. I've recently been studying some information there too, and watching some other bloggers, and it really resonated for me. So elaborating, drawing my own conclusions, building upon that, I want to share some of my thoughts and see if this is something that really resonates for you. So people who have a betrayal wound are people who suffer that wound usually early in childhood, though sometimes it can be a little bit later in childhood, and not to harp and blame everything on the parents, because my goodness, our attention is our power, and what one child pays more attention to, another child will not give so much significance to. So even as children, we need to say we're a little bit different. Not everybody would react in absolutely the same way to every situation, but a lot of these really deep wounds, like the betrayal wound, they do come from parents, and they do come from childhood, especially early childhood. Usually it comes from the mother, but it can also come from the father. So basically, when that kind of person who suffered this betrayal wound, say what happened is the mother left when the child was 3-4 years old, married somebody else, created a new family, and ignored the child. They're on, for example, saying that it's difficult, the communication with the dad didn't let me see you, that's why I didn't maintain a relationship with you, when the truth of the matter is she hardly tried, and she just found a better partner and she decided to create a new family. Or the child is born and the father doesn't acknowledge that it's his child, so the mother ends up raising the child by herself while the father is absent, and then later in life, when the child's 15 years old, 16 years old, finally the dad comes around and says, okay, I recognize you, you're my child. Narcissism. Also, the result, the official NPT diagnosis, the result of a betrayal wound by a mother who didn't allow the child to separate and individuate at a very young age, when the child was still a toddler. So all of these are different variations of the betrayal wound that was inflicted by one of the parents. And when the child grows up, there's usually certain ways that the coping mechanism developed as a result of that is going to show up. They're going to be very charming. More likely than not, they're going to be very charismatic. They're going to have an almost pathological need to be liked by people, to be liked by everybody that they come into contact with. If they're very social, if they're very extroverted, they will be kind of that, have that womanizing or that constantly trying to conquest people kind of vibe about them. If they're very introverted, then they actually can swing the opposite way, and they can be hyper independent. They can tell themselves they don't like people, they don't need people, they're trying to avoid people all the time, but it's just a different showing of the same kind of defensive behavior. Now, for a lot of these people, because in our early relationships, our early romantic relationships, we tend to recreate the dynamics with the original love of our lives, which is mom or dad. They will have encountered a relationship previously with a lot of toxicity. They would have met somebody who, in one way or another, through their own choices and consequent behavior, would have reinforced, reflected back to them, mirrored back to them that betrayal wound that they have. So that is not going to help the dynamic either. And often we look at these people and we say they're hopeless, they're hopeless in this behavior, they're very superficial, they don't let other people in, they don't value other people, they don't intimately connect to other people. But actually, these are very, very sensitive people. These are very, very vulnerable people. If you look at the showing, for example, where the person decides that they're an island unto themselves, they don't want to let anybody else in, that is the opposite of what they want. They're lying face to the world. They're often lying face to themselves. They're telling themselves they're better off, they're so good, but they want nothing more than to find somebody whom they feel safe loving and whom they feel safe allowing to be loved through. This person that is a social butterfly, that goes after the conquest more than anything else, that really needs the validation, that really needs the attention. It's the same kind of showing. It's just another way of providing themselves that sense of security, which was taken away from them when the betrayal wound was inflicted. So in reality, these people, if they choose, they can't just simply usually heal the wound on their own. Usually in cases of these wounds, you do need a partner in order to be able to reflect to you what is within you, in order to be able to heal the wound. But it's not impossible to do it from the light and not from the shadow. If somebody chooses to do it from the shadow, then basically they're just abusing their partner. It's not a worthwhile endeavor to undertake. But if somebody is choosing to do it from the light, to allow this kind of wound to be healed, then this is a kind of wound that can be healed with what? Extreme security, extreme safety, extreme containment, extreme reliability within a relationship. What they're looking for is somebody who is mothering or fathering, depending on who inflicted the wound on them, whom they perceive as completely reliable, completely true, completely safe, and within that environment, very, very slowly, usually this kind of person can start letting go of all of these defense mechanisms that they built up, because we as a society have this perception, no, these people never change, no, these people can, no, they do, they change, they can change, they do change, these people can be true, these people can be loyal, these people can change their patterns of behavior, but you are fighting an uphill battle. And I'm not just talking about NPDs. It's very extremely difficult to change a person like that. There's a whole group of people who have that kind of betrayal wound. But here's the natural coping mechanism of a person who has it when they decide, okay, they do want to pursue a relationship. But they're scared. They're scared out of their mind to be vulnerable with somebody. Because in the last 1, 2, 3 experiences when they were vulnerable with somebody, that somebody ended up hurting them, that somebody ended up punching them where it hurt the most. So their walls are greater than ever. Their ability to lie face to the world and their ability to lie face to themselves is stronger than ever. So the natural coping mechanism then for that kind of person becomes to, if they again want a relationship, to downgrade, basically, to find somebody whom they see as, oh, I'm going to be the best option that you can find around. You're not going to be able to score someone else like me, and within that I gain my sense of security, because you're not going to go around betraying me the way that all of these other people went around betraying me. But what happens, of course, then is for any kind of desire, for any kind of significant polarity to exist, attraction to each other, to exist within that relationship, what does the other person need to have? Whether they're actually a downgrade or the person is actually deluding themselves into believing that this is a downgrade, what the other person needs to have is also a betrayal wound. That's where the polarity comes from. Why? How does a betrayal wound attract a betrayal wound? Where's the polarity? The polarity is within the betrayal wound. For example, I got betrayed by, not a real case, I got betrayed by my mom when I was 6 years old when she left the family. You got betrayed by your dad who wouldn't recognize you as his son until you were 7 years old. There's polarity within the wound. But the nature of the wound, the nature of the attraction is the same. So these two people come together, and one person in that dynamic is telling themselves that they're completely safe in this new relationship, in this new dynamic, because there's such a catch for the other person. In the meantime, the other person is lying face to them, telling them how wonderful they are, how magnificent they are, how true of a person they are, when in reality they're nothing but. If they're not physically untrue, they're emotionally untrue. And why is that happening? That's happening because the other person also has a betrayal wound. And as a person who also has a betrayal wound, what is their strongest need? What do they seek out the most, just like the other partner in this dynamic? They want security. They want safety. They want reliability, containment, and loyalty. Absolute loyalty, reliability, and containment, much more than what the average person is looking for. And when they find themselves in a dynamic with somebody who considers themselves better than them, capable of dominating, capable of dictating their terms, dictating their vision, who thinks that they can do whatever they want and the other person is going to be there unconditionally, are their needs getting met? No. Their needs aren't getting met, and the only way that it looks like their needs are getting met is if they're not being completely forthcoming and they're not being completely honest. But what if a person is emotionally intelligent? What if a person is financially independent? What if they understand where their partner is coming from and what their partner actually needs to heal this wound coming from the light? And instead of judging them, they try to come from that position of allowing this safe space, knowing they don't actually want to run away, they don't actually want to betray, they don't actually want to abandon. They're just trying to create a dynamic within which they can feel safe, they can feel mothered. If that's what they didn't get, they can feel fathered. If that's what they didn't get, and I mean within a relatively unconditional childhood setting, because we can be very conditionally mothered and very conditionally fathered. And they want to feel like they're not going to get betrayed and they're not going to get abandoned. But here's the issue that arises then, right? What fuels desire? Mystery fuels desire. Insecurity fuels desire. Unpredictability fuels sexual desire. What happens when you give your partner, however sexually attractive you are, what happens when you give them absolute predictability? What happens when you give them absolute security? What happens when you give them all of these things because you understand them, you understand where they're coming from? How does it affect the desire within the dynamic? It affects the desire quite negatively. It becomes more of a friendship than romantic relationships. It becomes more of a cohabitation, more of two people living together, fulfilling their duties, if you wish. And again, it's a bit of that catch-22. You think you can fix it because you're with somebody who's not going to go anywhere, but you have a betrayal wound. You're not going to be with somebody who doesn't have a betrayal wound. And here you are with somebody who also has a betrayal wound, meeting your needs, or so you think, and not meeting their needs. And the way that you try to meet your needs negatively affects the tension and the desire that the two of you have together. So where do you go from there? I think for people who are more marginal cases within this, who have done their inner work, their healing, their forgiveness of the parental dynamic, their understanding of their own independent worthiness, really the two biggest things are you need to be financially independent and you need to be emotionally intelligent. Not just intelligent, you need to be emotionally intelligent. You need to be able to stay present with yourself in the moment and say, what is going on with me right now? What is happening here with me right now? Is it true that I really, really need that kind of level of safety? Is it true that I can get this level of safety from this dynamic that I'm creating and that I couldn't get that level of safety from something else? What if I'm emotionally intelligent enough to bet on a kind of relationship that takes a long time to build, and the security lays there in the effort put forward by both parties, rather than in the idea that I'm completely in control and that I completely dominate the situation. All right, guys, cheers. Just some thoughts with you guys that I wanted to share, because a lot of people have that betrayal wound to one degree or another. Some people have a very strong betrayal wound, and the way that we perceive these people, like they're just pathologically that way, like they can't change. It's not true. People do change, people can change, but instead of judging the person, you gotta understand the person, and instead of judging yourself, you gotta understand yourself. Cheers, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.